Welcome to Louisiana, 1903. A night when shadows moved like whispers across the cane fields. When the air itself seemed to pulse with secrets no one dared speak aloud. When a single figure vanished from the plantation quarters, leaving only cold, rattling chains and a silence heavier than the river fog. The official ledger marked her fate as unknown, yet those who lived nearby swore they glimpsed her silhouette in the firelight. Candle flames flickered across her hooded form. A black nun moving silently, her eyes glinting with knowledge older than the plantation itself. Drums beat faintly across the river. Some said it was the wind. Others insisted it was her, guiding the spirits, calling vengeance, bending the air around her. Every breath of night carried a rhythm, a warning, a story waiting to be told. Before we begin, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Note the moment that sent a shiver down your spine. Describe what you see or imagine in the shadows. Connect your experience with the history and legend of this night. Feel the weight of stories that were meant to be forgotten. And share it so others can follow the echoes across time. The fog rolled through the abandoned cane fields, curling around the burned remnants of cabins. The scent of burnt sugar lingered in the hollows of the quarters, clinging to splintered wood and clay floors. Official records documented only absence. Newspapers described fate unknown with ink that faded as quickly as memory. Yet folklore whispered differently. Children huddled beneath quilts, wide-eyed spoke of lanterns floating above the river, moving against the current. Elders recalled nights when footsteps echoed where no one dared tread. Shadows twisted unnaturally across walls. The chains left in the quarters shifted, rattling softly, as if moved by unseen hands, humming faintly with her song. A song of revenge. A song that traveled through the wind, through the cane, into the minds of those who dared to listen. Reports from the Freedmen's Bureau noted missing women. Letters from plantation overseers recorded empty cabins. Yet in the diaries of freedmen, nights were described thick with a presence. Drums beating somewhere distant but precise, methodical, not carried by wind. Whispers along the riverbank, glimpses of a hooded nun passing between the trees, leaving footprints that vanished before dawn. Townsfolk claimed the air would shiver when she passed, the temperature dropping, objects moving ever so slightly. History documented nothing, yet memory refused to forget. At the river's edge, traders reported inexplicable chills. Lanterns swinging through no breeze moved them, doors creaking open by themselves, objects displaced with eerie precision. In the official reports, these were dismissed as superstition. In the folklore, they were proof that vengeance and memory were not bound by the ledger, that her presence persisted, that the chains rattled not from wind, but from the echo of her spirit, stretching across cane and river, across generations, calling those who had wronged her and those who dared ignore the truth. By nightfall, the tale had spread beyond the plantation. Traders, neighbors, and children alike recounted sightings. A figure in white gliding across the cane. Footsteps echoing in silence. Doors opening on their own. The subtle hum of chains. The air vibrating with unseen rhythms. A warning. A call. History recorded absence, but memory and song and fear recorded her presence still. Welcome to a night when spirits rose. When vengeance whispered on the wind. When fact and legend blurred. And when the story of the black nun, silent, vigilant, unyielding, remains alive. January 1903. The winter air hung heavy over the lowlands of Louisiana. Fog rolled off the river in silver waves, curling through the cane fields, through the broken fences, and across the scattered remnants of plantation quarters. The landscape itself seemed suspended between memory and decay, a liminal space where history had not fully claimed what was lost. The river whispered incessantly, carrying tales from upriver and back again. tales of disappearances, of vengeance, of spirits that refused rest. The earth was cold, soaked by the winter rains, mud clinging to boots, to hooves, to the bare feet of those who dared move through it. The scent of burnt cane lingered, a faint but persistent reminder of the fires that had consumed the sugar presses in years past, fires that were said to be lit not only by accident, but by unseen hands. The quarters themselves, wooden cabins with shutters hanging on rusted hinges, stood hollow and silent. Yet life clung to them in fragments. A rooster crowed from some hidden loft. A dog barked at the mist, and the wind carried whispers that could not be traced. Official maps of the plantation from the Freedmen's Bureau detailed the structures, the boundaries of the fields, the roads to the river. But the maps could not capture the atmosphere. They could not note the chill that settled in the marrow of those who lingered too long, nor the sudden, inexplicable flicker of light across the river when no lanterns burned. The record spoke in concrete terms. Acres planted, workers accounted for, crops tallied. The folklore spoke in rhythm and shadow. It spoke of the black nun who moved silently through the fields, her presence felt but rarely seen. Of drums that beat at midnight, though no one played them. Of lanterns floating upstream against the current as if guided by her hand. The town nearby, a cluster of wooden shacks and clapboard stores, had grown cautiously in the wake of reconstruction. Streets were narrow, dirt-strewn, and often deserted by dusk. Shopkeepers shuttered early, fearful of rumors carried on the wind. The local preacher's ledger recorded the names of parishioners, baptisms, deaths. Yet it also contained entries marked "Fate Unknown," people who simply vanished. Historians reviewing these ledgers might consider them anomalies, clerical errors, but the townsfolk spoke differently. They spoke of footsteps along the boardwalk at night, of cold gusts that seemed to whisper warnings of lanterns swaying. The windows were closed. Children dared not leave their beds when the wind carried these stories. And mothers muttered prayers under their breath, crossing themselves in hope that the black nun would not linger too close to their homes. The environment itself reinforced the sense of unease. Twisted cypress trees, their roots knotted like gnarled fingers, rose from the swampy soil. Spanish moss hung in silver drapes, swaying despite still air. The river, broad and sluggish, reflected the moonlight in fractured, shifting patterns. Wildlife stirred in the shadows. Frogs croaked, owls hooted, and unseen animals rustled in the reeds. Yet some nights the sounds were not merely natural. Neighbors claimed to hear the measured steps of boots on the mud, the faint beat of drums carried from across the fields, and sometimes the soft melodic hum of a woman's voice. No one could explain it. Official reports suggested wind or animals. Folklore insisted it was her, the black nun, guardian of vengeance, sentinel of the missing. Inside the cabins, life continued in fragments of routine. Women tended fires, cooking rice and beans in iron pots. Children moved quietly, playing with makeshift toys while keeping watch for shadows. Men repaired fences, hauled water, or guided mules through the cane. Yet even within these walls, unease seeped in. Jars of preserved vegetables rattled, as if shaken by unseen hands. Doors creaked open in empty rooms. The air grew inexplicably cold, and pockets' breath visible, where no drafts should have been. The Freedmen's Bureau records never captured these details, nor did the plantation's overseer journals. But folklore chronicled them faithfully. Songs hummed to babies included warnings disguised as lullabies. Elders whispered of nights when lanterns floated above cabins, when shadows stretched unnaturally, and when the black nun walked unseen among them. The seasonal rhythms of the plantation and town juxtaposed the supernatural presence. By day the world was measured, fields counted animals, fed townsfolk, going about commerce. Yet the nights carried the memory of absence, of things left unexplained. Drums echoed lanterns, floated footsteps appeared where none should. Letters sent upriver spoke only of normalcy. Newspapers printed crops, harvested prices, and minor incidents. Yet the oral tradition thrived. It recorded what documents could not. The Black Nun. Her movement across the fields, her watch over those who had disappeared, her quiet insistence that vengeance remained alive. Even the river played its part, rising and falling with a rhythm that did not align with the tides. Reflections shifted unnaturally. At certain hours, the surface seemed to shimmer with figures not present on the banks. Traders moving along the water noted chills, lanterns tilting without wind. Some swore they heard faint singing. Others claimed they glimpsed her hooded and calm, moving silently along the river's edge, chains in hand. Official maritime reports recorded nothing. Folklore preserved every sighting, every whisper, every chill along the riverbank. This was Louisiana in 1903. A landscape suspended between history and legend. The cold winter fog, the cane fields, the twisted trees, the abandoned quarters. All part of the stage on which fact and folklore would collide. The Black Nun's presence threaded through each detail, her footsteps unseen, her gaze unwavering, a sentinel who carried memory and vengeance in equal measure. The night itself seemed alive, watching, waiting, recording. And so the stage was set. Not merely a plantation, not merely a town, not merely a river and cane, but a world in which history and memory intertwined, where fact layer and folklore layer existed side by side, where every sound, every shadow, every shifting chain could hold meaning, where the Black Nun's story could be traced across land and river, across ledger and lullaby, across memory and rumor. Before we continue, pause. Leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Note the moment when the air feels thick, the shadows seem to move. Share what chills your spine. Connect your presence to hers, to the land, to the river, to the whispers that refuse to be silenced. Your experience becomes part of this living history. The first record spoke in quiet, bureaucratic tones. The Freedmen's Bureau noted the absence of women and men from the plantation. Fate unknown, the ink read. Ledger entries listed names without explanation, dates without closure. Official letters referenced empty cabins, fields left untended, mules wandering free. Nothing more. Yet these documents, cold and measured, could not capture the tension in the air, the weight of unspoken fear. The fact of absence alone was insufficient to explain what the neighbors witnessed. Children whispering beneath quilts spoke of lanterns moving against the wind, floating, swaying, and yet never extinguished. Elders recalled the rhythmic tapping of drums far beyond any human presence. Drums that began when the moon struck the river, just so. The wind seemed to carry voices muttering warnings in languages forgotten. Some swore they heard the faintest echo of a woman's song rising and falling in the fog. Her song carried not only warning, but vengeance. A melody stitched into the air, woven into the shadows. The plantation maps detailed acres planted, roads to the river quarters, numbered mules assigned, yet none noted the footprints appearing in the mud where no one had walked. None mentioned the lantern light that flickered across the cane at midnight. Official newspapers reported crops harvested, minor illnesses, routine disappearances. Nothing extraordinary, they claimed. But oral histories preserved a different picture. The Black Nun, hooded, calm, and precise, walked silently among the cane. Her presence marked by subtle disturbances, chains rattling, whispers carried on the wind. A figure unseen, yet undeniably there. Accounts from the overseer journals were similarly factual. They recorded duties, crop yields, and worker attendance. But sometimes in the margins, the ink betrayed hesitation. Notes of strange sounds at night, unexplained lights near the quarters, workers claiming visions of a woman passing silently. These small annotations, barely legible, were swallowed by time. Historians would later dismiss them as superstition, but the local folklore had preserved them intact. Songs hummed to children lullabies, infused with cautionary warnings. Every shadow, every creaking door, every flickering light remembered. One of the first mini cases recorded by the town's oral historians involved a young woman named Eliza. She disappeared from her cabin without trace. The ledger noted her absence. The plantation map still marked her room. Yet neighbors swore they saw her silhouette moving across the fields at dusk. Candlelight reflecting in her eyes, her hands raised as if summoning something beyond. Drums beat in the distance, though no drummer was ever found. The children who saw her whispered of her soft voice singing in the wind, a melody both sorrowful and angry. A few nights later, another cabin stood empty, the inhabitants gone. Chains rattled inside windows, shook though no storm blew. Newspapers carried the story briefly, labeling it another disappearance with no follow-up. Yet in the WPA narratives, the elders recounted how the black nun appeared along the riverbank. Hooded silent, her gaze unwavering, carrying chains. Some claimed she laid hands upon the ground, and the river responded. Water rippling without wind reeds, bending without cause. Symbols unseen to the eye, but unmistakable to those who knew. A presence that history recorded as absence, but memory preserved as warning. The next case involved the plantation fields. A worker tending sugarcane reported hearing voices calling her name. She followed them into the mist and vanished. Overseer logs marked her absent the following morning. No trace was found. Yet folklore told of a lantern floating across the fields guiding her. A figure appearing silently at the edge of the cane-hooded, dark-skinned eyes reflecting candlelight. The black nun, guarding the missing, punishing neglect, exacting vengeance, teaching caution. The workers' song, later sung by children, became a warning for decades. Even the river held stories. Traders moving along the water noted lights appearing midstream, chains rattling across the banks. Whispers that seemed human, yet impossibly low. Official maritime logs recorded nothing. Letters sent upriver spoke only of weather harvest routine events. But folklore passed in whispered tones documented her presence. That she moved like the wind, bending the river, commanding the mist. Unseen, but undeniable. Fact and legend intertwined. The ledger marked absence. The river, the wind, the cane remembered. The plantation itself, when examined through census and property records, appeared orderly. Slaves accounted for workers, tallied crops harvested. Yet, interviews conducted decades later, with descendants of freedmen, revealed inconsistencies. Reports of unusual lights, footprints that vanished singing in the fog drums heard in the distance. Elders insisted the black nun was watching, protecting, punishing, guiding those who had vanished, her presence inscribed in memory, not in ink, not in maps, but in the rhythm of the wind, the whisper of reeds, the rattle of chains. One account noted how during the night a young child saw the figure crossing the field, hooded and silent, chains in hand, eyes glinting in the dim candlelight. She paused, glanced toward the river, then disappeared into the fog. The child's mother later recounted the story to WPA interviewers. Her voice trembled. She claimed the black nun had saved them, or perhaps judged them, or perhaps both. The details were fragmented. Some might consider them imagination. But in the layered narratives, every fragment mattered. Fact layer recorded disappearance. Folklore layer recorded presence. The two existed in tension and conversation, in haunting synchrony. Over the following weeks, the plantation records continued. Yet the folklore thickened. Nights carried lanterns floating upstream, shadows twisting along walls, the rattle of chains inside empty quarters, whispers of the black nun moving silently through the cane. Songs hummed by children contained warnings embedded in their melody. Elders swore the same figures reappeared at the river during the full moon. The wind carried drums. No one played them. Townsfolk reported feeling cold pockets' footsteps behind them. The ledger marked absence. Memory marked vigilance. History recorded the missing. Folklore recorded her presence. Each disappearance became a thread, woven into a tapestry of fear, mystery, and reverence. Fact layer ledger entries, Freedmen's Bureau reports, newspaper notices. Folklore. Layer whispered warning songs, lanterns, moving drums, beating in the fog. Each layer informing the other, overlapping, refusing to be separated. The black nun moved through both. She was the link, the bridge between the measurable and the unexplainable. A sentinel whose presence neither maps nor ink could fully capture. The community, though, cautious, kept the story alive. Not in print, not in law, but in song and warning, in ritual. Mothers singing lullabies, children pointing at shadows, elders murmuring incantations under their breath. The black nun's figure remained constant. Her hooded form, her dark skin glinting in candlelight, chains rattling softly, eyes unblinking. Protecting, punishing, remembering, teaching. And all the while the plantation ledger recorded only absence. The river, the fields, and the wind recorded everything else. Even the official records, when revisited decades later, seemed to pulse with the memory of what had been omitted. Entries marked missing or fate unknown appeared more frequent. Historians puzzled at the number of unaccounted-for individuals. Yet, oral histories and WPA narratives explained it simply. She walked the cane. She moved through the river fog. She carried vengeance and protection in equal measure. And those who were marked absent were never truly gone. Not to her. Not to the wind. Not to the cane. By the end of the winter, the plantation and its surroundings had become a stage. Each ledger entry, each whispered tale, each floating lantern, each rattling chain, all intertwined. Fact and folklore inseparable. The black nun observed it all, her presence guiding the unseen threads of justice, vengeance, and memory. A figure alive in shadow, in wind, in water. Before we move on, pause. Reflect. Leave a comment. Tell us which part chills you most. Share the exact moment your imagination caught her silhouette in the mist. Connect your experience to hers, to the cane, to the river, to the whispers that refuse to be silenced. Participate in preserving a story that history tried to forget. The nights grew longer, heavier as January pressed onward. The fog thickened over the cane fields, and with it came the whispers of absence. A young woman named Clara disappeared from her cabin near the river. The ledger noted her absence in precise bureaucratic terms. Fate unknown. Yet neighbors swore they saw her silhouette gliding between the cane-hooded silent eyes glinting with candlelight. The wind carried faint echoes of her voice. A song neither joyful nor mournful, but a warning. Drums beat far off, irregular, yet deliberate, stirring the mist into waves that seemed to follow her. The children who witnessed it shivered and pointed, yet no one else saw the figure. Some claimed she vanished into thin air. Others swore she merged with the shadows, moving through them as one. Another cabin further up the plantation stood empty one night. A family had vanished. The doors creaked open, yet no wind blew. The fire had died to embers untouched. Chains rattled in the back room. Neighbors reported seeing lanterns floating along the riverbank, the light bobbing as if guided by unseen hands. Official reports dismissed the disappearances as runaway cases. Newspapers printed small notes, yet oral histories told a different story. The black nun had been there, watching. Her presence silent but absolute, moving between the river and the cane, ensuring her warning was heard. her vengeance respected. In the fields, laborers recounted strange phenomena. Crops growing strangely in neat rows, while others wilted overnight. Tools misplaced, footprints appearing and disappearing in mud. One worker claimed he saw her standing atop a small hill chains, dangling from her hands, a shadow stretching impossibly long behind her. The sun rose, and she was gone. Yet the footprints remained. Official journals offered no explanation. Folklore preserved every step, every shadow, every rattling chain. Meanwhile, the town near the plantation grew wary. Traders moving goods along the river reported inexplicable chills. Lanterns tilting though no breeze moved them, doors opening and closing on their own. The rhythmic tapping of drums, soft at first, then louder seemingly in response to the fog's movement. Some claimed to see her figure, hooded, black-skinned, silent, gliding along the main street, pausing to watch those who dared venture out. The townsfolk avoided the riverbanks after dusk. Children spoke in whispers of her presence, of floating lights, of the chains that rattled softly in the wind. Historians would later dismiss these as superstition. Yet the pattern persisted. The black nun's influence was tangible. One of the most striking incidents occurred when a small group of freedmen attempted to cross the river to visit kin upriver. The ledger recorded their journey. All accounted for, yet none returned. A witness claimed to see a hooded figure appear on the bank, her chains rattling softly, the mist curling around her. The travelers vanished into the fog. Newspapers mentioned nothing. The town's oral tradition, however, recounted her standing there guiding or perhaps punishing them. The river itself seemed to respond. Ripples forming without wind, water reflecting shapes not present. Their absence was recorded in ink, their presence in memory. The plantation's quarters became a stage for many episodes of disappearance and strange phenomena. One night, a young boy saw the black nun cross the yard, candlelight glinting on her chains. He froze. She paused, raising her hand, and the air itself seemed to shiver. Shadows twisted, doors creaked, the dogs barked. She moved on, leaving only the faintest echo of a melody. He ran to tell his mother. She hushed him, whispered prayers under her breath. The ledger would mark no incident. Yet the memory endured, sung in lullabies for years. Even the river carried stories. Boats drifting downstream reported lanterns bobbing against the current. Subtle drumming, soft but insistent. Passengers felt unseen eyes upon them. Some swore they glimpsed her on the bank, hooded, dark-skinned, chains in hand, eyes reflecting candlelight. The folklore layer preserved these moments. Each detail repeated, expanded, memorized. Every whispered story adding to the tension, the sense that absence was not empty, that presence lingered, that history could not fully erase her. Over the following nights, multiple mini-cases intertwined. Families vanished. Footprints appeared and disappeared. Lanterns floated through the fog. The cane fields seemed to move beneath invisible feet. Dogs refused to cross certain patches of land. Horses shied inexplicably. All official reports denied unusual activity. Newspapers published mundane accounts. Yet the oral histories documented a silent, watchful presence. The black nun moving through the mist, guiding, punishing, protecting, each incident rising in intensity. A crescendo of tension that could not be ignored. Even within the plantation itself, anomalies persisted. Jars rattled on shelves, the air cooled in patches with no draft. Doors opened on their own. Children screamed at shadows that moved too deliberately. Adults reported sensing someone behind them when alone. The ledger marked routine work completed. The folklore layer chronicled every unexplained detail, the black nun's shadow weaving through both worlds. By mid-January, the pattern became unmistakable. The disappearances, the lanterns, the floating chains, the drumming in the fog. Many cases multiplied. The community whispered in hushed tones. They avoided the cane fields at night. They avoided the river. And yet the black nun's presence remained. A reminder that vengeance and memory were inseparable. That fact layer recorded absence. Folklore layer recorded presence. Both layers interacting inseparable, sustaining the tension. The plantation and the town had become a theater. Each incident, each disappearance, each floating lantern added a thread to a larger tapestry. Fact and folklore existed side by side. The black nun moved through it all, silent, unwavering, her chains rattling softly, eyes reflecting candlelight, footsteps moving across the cane, protecting, punishing, remembering, teaching. Her presence tangible even when unseen. Before we move forward, pause. Leave a comment below. Tell us which mini-incident chills you most. Share what moment made your imagination catch her silhouette in the fog. Connect your presence to hers, to the river, the cane, the whispers that refuse to be silenced. Contribute to the living memory of a story that history tried to bury. The ledger entries from the Freedmen's Bureau grew more detailed as weeks passed. Reports of the vanished multiplied. Census notes indicated cabins empty. Names crossed out, replaced by ellipses. Fate unknown, repeated with mechanical consistency. Yet the ledger could not record the whispers that haunted the riverbanks, the subtle movement of lanterns against the fog. Footprints appearing in the mud, only to vanish moments later. Official correspondence mentioned nothing unusual. Yet letters between plantation owners noted uneasy nights workers, claiming visions of a hooded figure, the rhythm of distant drums vibrating through the cane fields. The fact layer presented an orderly chronology of absence. The folklore layer told a story alive with presence, with intention, with the black nun guiding, judging, observing. Maps drawn to document property boundaries revealed neat rows of cane. The river winding like silver thread through the lowlands, cabins numbered and accounted for. Yet, oral histories contradicted the sterile precision of maps. Lanterns floating upstream, shadows stretching longer than possible chains, rattling in empty rooms. Children whispered that she appeared atop the levee and gazing downriver, eyes reflecting the glow of distant fires. The river responded, ripples forming in unnatural patterns, reeds bending against the current. Historians called it imagination. Folklore called it justice. The black nun existed in both. Fact recorded the absence. Folklore recorded the presence, both layers intertwining, inseparable. One night, an entire family disappeared from the southern quarters. Official reports claimed they had run away. Yet eyewitnesses told another tale. The black nun appeared at the edge of the river, hooded silent. Chains clinking softly, the mist curling around her. The family vanished into the fog, leaving only faint imprints in the mud. Newspapers printed the standard notices, factual yet lacking context. Folklore preserved every detail. The lanterns bobbing, the soft drumming in the distance, the rhythmic sway of the cane. She had been there, guarding, punishing, guiding, teaching the living to fear, respect, remember. The town's oral narrative spoke of other anomalies. Lanterns that floated upriver against the wind. Shadows of a hooded figure appearing along deserted streets. Subtle tremors in the earth as if some seen presence walked beneath the soil. Dogs refused to enter certain patches of land. Horses shied inexplicably. Children trembled when the wind carried faint melodies sung neither joyfully nor mournfully, but as a warning. Fact layer had no account of these subtleties. Yet the folklore layer preserved them. Repeated, remembered, whispered. The black nun's influence tangible, though invisible. In the plantation fields, tools vanished overnight. Footprints appeared where no one had walked. Crops twisted unnaturally, some flourishing while others wilted. Workers spoke in hushed tones of a figure atop a small hill, hooded eyes reflecting candlelight chains dangling. The wind carried her song, a melody both sorrowful and vengeful. The fact layer documented the missing crops, the abandoned fields. The folklore layer documented the cadence of her movement, the lesson embedded in each disappearance. The plantation ledger remained silent. The memory spoke loudly. A series of letters sent upriver described strange phenomena, lanterns floating against the current, sounds of drums that moved with the fog. Travelers reporting chills, glimpses of a hooded nun along the banks. Letters were carefully redacted before reaching newspapers. Editors dismissed them as imagination. Yet the oral histories chronicled every incident. Chains rattling softly, shadows twisting unnaturally. The black nun appeared at the edge of perception, her presence marking events official records could not. She bridged absence and observation, fact and memory, ensuring that justice or vengeance remained alive in the minds of those who witnessed. Dream narratives collected by WPA interviewers decades later recalled nights thick with mist and fear. Children and elders alike described visions of her walking silently through the cane, shadows that twisted around corners and along walls, chains clinking softly resonating with her song. Dreams carried warnings: do not trespass, do not ignore, do not forget. Fact layer recorded only absence. Yet the folklore layer preserved the black nun's rhythm, her intent, her presence in every shadow, every rattle, every whisper. Memory became the repository of truth, absent from official records. The river itself became part of the narrative. Reflections shifting in unnatural patterns, lanterns appearing midstream, the subtle hum of chains echoing across the water. Some swore they glimpsed her atop the levee-hooded, dark-skinned, moving silently along the banks. The wind carried her song faint yet unmistakable. Fact layer recorded nothing. Folklore layer preserved every nuance. The black nun existed in both worlds, her presence tangible even when unseen. Threads of vengeance and protection woven across land, river, and cane. By midwinter, the incidents formed a tapestry. Each disappearance, each floating lantern, each rattling chain, woven into a network of tension, fear, and reverence. Fact layer ledger entries. Friedman's Bureau reports newspaper notices. Folklore layer whispered warning songs, lanterns floating in fog, drums beating. Each layer informing the other, creating a landscape where absence and presence coexisted. The black nun moved through it all, silent, unwavering. Eyes reflecting candlelight, chains rattling softly, footsteps on the cane, teaching, punishing, guiding. The ledger recorded absence, memory recorded vigilance. Even the plantation animals seemed aware. Dogs refusing to enter certain fields, mules shying at shadows, birds flying erratically as the mist thickened. The land itself responding to her presence. Fact layer had no account. Yet the folklore layer captured each subtle movement, each echo, each rhythm. The black nun's vigil extended beyond the living, reaching into the soil, the water, the air. Her song carried through generations, warning, teaching, haunting. The final mini-case of the winter involved a group of freedmen attempting to cross the river. The ledger accounted for them. Yet eyewitnesses spoke of lanterns floating upstream, a hooded figure standing silently on the bank, chains clinking, the mist curling around her. The travelers vanished into the fog. Newspapers noted nothing unusual. Yet oral histories recorded every detail. The black nun guarding her charge, exacting justice, enforcing boundaries that fact alone could not define. Absence documented in ink, presence documented in memory. Before we move to the deep bridge and climax, pause, leave a comment. Tell us which sighting chills you most, which drifting lantern haunts your imagination, where in the fog you can picture her hooded form Participate in the story. Connect your presence to Mars, to the river, to the cane, to the whispers that refuse to be silenced. And know that this story is alive, even when recorded as absence. The fog had thickened by mid-February. The cane fields stretched like silver waves beneath the ghostly moonlight. Every shadow seemed elongated, moving independently of the trees. Footprints appeared in mud and vanished. Chains rattled softly in abandoned cabins. The ledger recorded only absence, yet the air pulsed with the rhythm of presence. The black nun walked silently through the mist, her hooded form glinting faintly in candlelight. Her eyes dark and unwavering reflected decades of grief, vengeance, and memory. Across the plantation, reports both formal and whispered converged. A young girl vanished from the southern quarters. A trader's journal noted a lantern floating upstream. Footsteps echoing across empty streets. A farmer claimed to see the hooded figure atop the levee chains, dangling standing sentinel over the river. Official records marked nothing unusual. Newspapers printed routine news. Yet oral histories captured every subtle movement, every breath, every rattle of chain and flicker of light. The black nun existed in both layers, fact and folklore, intertwined inseparable. A crescendo of incidents marked the night of the full moon. Families reported doors opening on their own, jars rattling, shadows twisting unnaturally, lanterns floating along the river against the current. The wind carrying soft melodies, a song neither joyful nor mournful, but a warning, a declaration. Those who dared walk the cane felt unseen eyes upon them, chills that ran deeper than cold. The black nun moved with purpose, presence made tangible by absence. Chains rattling in cadence with the distant drums, the river responding, reeds bending, water rippling without wind. All evidence ignored by formal records, yet preserved in the stories sung, whispered, remembered. One particularly striking incident involved the disappearance of 3 men attempting to cross the cane fields at midnight. The ledger listed them as absent. No bodies were recovered. The WPA narratives, collected decades later, described how the black nun appeared at the edge of the mist. Hooded silent chains, glinting in moonlight. Guiding. Judging. The men vanished into the fog, their fate unknown to history, yet preserved vividly in memory. The wind carried her song across the fields, a melody that seemed to bend space to mark territory to instruct the living. Fact layer recorded only absence. Folklore layer documented presence, vigilance, and retribution. The river, slow and broad, reflected her presence in surreal ways. Lanterns floating upstream, chains glimpsed shimmering under the fog, soft drumming echoing through the night. Travelers along the riverbank felt unseen hands brush against their shoulders, whispers carried by the wind. No official record captured it, yet the local community remembered every nuance, each fragment preserved in the rhythm of song, in the cadence of stories. The black nun moved across land and water, her presence bridging the living and the missing, the recorded and the forgotten. At the plantation, reports of unusual phenomena intensified. Tools vanished. Shadows moved independently of their source. Doors opened and closed with subtle intention. The cane fields seemed to twist beneath invisible footsteps. Workers whispered of her appearance atop a small hill, hooded chains dangling, eyes reflecting faint candlelight. The wind carried her song warning, declaring guiding. Ledger entries remained mute, yet oral histories captured her motion, her rhythm, her intent. Fact layer documented absence. Folklore layer documented presence. The two existed simultaneously, intertwined in tension and memory. Across town, traders, children, and elders alike recounted sightings. Lanterns floating against the current, footsteps in the fog, doors creaking open, chains rattling. A song carried softly across the wind, each incident reinforcing the presence of the Black Nun, a sentinel whose actions bridged justice, vengeance, and memory. Historians would later puzzle over missing records. Newspapers noted only mundane events, yet oral histories persisted, preserving her authority and the message she carried. Absence marked in ink, presence remembered in song. The climax built slowly, inexorably. The full moon rising above the river, casting silver light across the cane fields. Shadows lengthened. The wind carried the soft hum of chains, the faint drumming of distant footsteps. The Black Nun moved silently, appearing at the edge of perception. Chains glinting, eyes unwavering. A sentinel of vengeance, protecting the vanished, marking the living. The river responded, ripples forming in impossible patterns. Lanterns floated, guided by unseen hands. Her song rose with the mist. Fact layer ignored her existence. Folklore layer amplified it. Memory and legend intertwined. One night a child reported seeing her silhouette gliding between the cane, hooded, dark-skinned, chains in hand. She paused, glanced toward the river, and disappeared. Footprints vanished. Jars rattled softly inside empty cabins. The air thickened with anticipation, as if the land itself waited. Historians called it coincidence. Neighbors called it fear. The folklore layer called it truth. Fact layer recorded absence. Memory recorded presence. Her song, carried in the wind, in the river, in the shadows, resonated across decades. Even the riverbank told stories. Lanterns floating upstream, ripples forming without wind, chains glinting in the fog, shadows twisting unnaturally. Travelers froze in place, footsteps behind them, soft drumming echoing in rhythm with the fog. The Black Nun standing sentinel. Fact layer documented nothing. Folklore layer documented every detail. Her presence tangible though unseen. Every absence noted in official records, every presence preserved in memory, whispered in song, repeated in legend. The tension reached a crescendo, the night alive with anticipation. The Black Nun moving silently, unyielding, protecting, punishing, remembering, teaching. Before the final scene fades, pause. Leave a comment. Tell us which moment unsettles you most. Where in the fog you imagine her hooded figure. Which lantern, which chain, which ripple in the river haunts your imagination. Share your experience, become part of this living story. Connect your presence to Mars, to the cane, to the river, to the whispers that refuse to be silenced. The night had reached its zenith. Every chain rattled, every lantern bobbed, every shadow twisted. The Black Nun's vigil extended across land, river, and memory. Fact layer recorded absence. Folklore layer recorded presence. And together they created a tapestry of tension, reverence, and haunting that could not be ignored. The story alive, unstoppable, waiting for the next witness. The river flows still, carrying its memories. The cane fields stretch beneath the winter sun, seemingly calm. Yet those who know the stories understand the silence is deceptive. The plantations lie empty. Some cabins burned, others abandoned. Ledger entries marked absence, names crossed out, forgotten in official records. Yet the memory persists. The Black Nun's presence remains carried in whispers, in song, in shadows that refuse to dissipate. The wind still echoes with her melody. The chains rattle softly in empty rooms. The lanterns bob gently in the fog, even when no one watches. Historians would later return to the plantation, poring over the same ledgers, the same maps, the same reports. They would record dates, owners, crops, census data. They would note anomalies, unexplained disappearances, fate unknown. Yet the written record could not capture what memory preserved. Oral histories told of nights when the black nun walked silently, of families vanishing into fog, of lanterns floating upstream, of footsteps in the mud appearing and disappearing. The ledger recorded absence, folklore recorded presence, and in that tension, the truth endured. The town nearby remained wary for decades. Traders avoided the river at night. Children were warned never to wander the cane. Elders spoke of her in low tones. The black nun became a figure woven into the collective memory, a sentinel, a guardian, a punisher. She became the measure of caution and respect. Fact layer documented absence, folklore layer preserved presence, and those who passed the stories down ensured that the night of 1903 remained alive. Even the river remembered, its surface rippling unnaturally at times, responding to something unseen. Lanterns reflected in impossible angles. Chains rattled when no one approached. Fog rolled along the banks, thick and deliberate, as if carrying a message. Official records never noted these phenomena. Yet the witnesses did, and their memories carried the rhythm, the cadence, the presence of the black nun. She became inseparable from the landscape, part of the air, part of the water, part of the cane itself. The plantation records, revisited years later, offered little clarity. Census data, property maps, bureau documents, all noted absence. Yet every interview, every oral narrative, every whispered tale described presence. The black nun moved through the fog. Her chains echoed softly across generations. Songs hummed by children contained hidden warnings. Spirituals recorded her movement. Memory became the vessel of truth. Fact layer silent. Folklore layer resonant. Presence enduring where absence was official. Decades passed. The town changed. Plantations fell into disrepair. The river shifted its course slightly, yet the echoes persisted. Children grown into elders still spoke of floating lanterns, the twisting of shadows, the subtle rattle of chains in abandoned quarters, the soft cadence of drums in the mist. The black nun's story was no longer merely local. It traveled with those who remembered, carried in song, carried in whispered warnings, carried in the wind. Fact and folklore intertwined, inseparable. Teaching, warning, haunting. Anthropologists, historians, and researchers would attempt to reconstruct the events, poring over archival materials, examining the river, the cane fields, the cabins. Yet no official record could fully capture what memory and song preserved. Notes of absence, visions of presence, ledger entries, eyewitness accounts, children's stories, all creating a tapestry that could not be ignored. She existed in the gaps in the fog, in the music of the wind. The black nun. A sentinel of memory, of vengeance, of justice that the ink could never record. Even today the landscape bears her trace. The cane fields grow tall in summer, yet shadows twist where none should. Lanterns sway inexplicably along the riverbank. Chains rattle softly in the abandoned cabins. Children are told the stories. Songs sung during winter evenings carry her rhythm. Elders speak softly of her eyes, her chains, her song. The black nun continues to inhabit memory, a reminder that fact layer and folklore layer exist together. That absence in records does not mean absence in reality. The river, the fog, the cane, the empty cabins, they all hold her presence. The night of 1903 continues to ripple through time. The black nun's vigilance never ceased. The disappeared remain in memory. The living carry the echoes. Historians record what they can. The rest is preserved in story, in rhythm, in wind. Fact layer notes absence. Folklore layer notes presence. Together they tell a story of caution, of vengeance, of memory that refuses to die. Before we end, pause, reflect, leave a comment. Share which moment lingers in your imagination. where you can feel her presence in the fog, hear her song in the wind. Connect to the whispers that have traveled across decades. Participate in the memory of a night that refuses to be forgotten. A night when fact and folklore intertwined. When absence became presence. When vengeance, justice, and memory walked silently through the cane fields. The plantation and the town remain, quiet yet alive. The ledger entries cold, unfeeling. The wind alive with stories. The river carrying echoes. The cane twisting gently. The black nun's song humming softly through time. The chains rattling in the mind, in the imagination, in the memory. Fact layer may record absence. Folklore. Layer preserves presence, and together they ensure that the story endures, waiting, watching, whispering, for anyone willing to listen.